Imagine being the greatest warrior on earth. Like you literally possess this divine power to choose the exact moment of your own death.
Right.
But instead of, I don't know, using it to avoid pain, you choose to lie paralyzed on a bed of arrows for 58 days just to impart this massive philosophical lesson to the guys who, put you there in the first place.
Yeah, it's a wild image.
It is. And that is the murky, just mind-bending reality of the figure we are exploring today in this deep dive. Looking at the massive stack of sources you send over, I mean, we've got Wikipedia entries, historical analyses, some very heated Reddit threads.
Oh, yeah, the Reddit debates get intense.
Very intense. But looking at all of it, it's incredibly clear why people are so captivated by Bhishma. He's easily one of the most central, complex, and honestly controversial figures in the Mahabharata.
Absolutely.
But, going through your notes, especially the frustration you highlighted about the 1988 TV adaptation versus the 2013 version.
Right.
The whole masala TV drama aspect. Exactly. We realize our mission today is to completely bypass all that TV masala.
Yeah.
Because those adaptations, they notoriously distort the texts, right? They add these romance tracks, they soften the harsh edges of characters, they warp the timeline strictly for drama.
Yeah, they do. And to find the authentic Bhishma, we really have to look past those glowing television halos. We're relying on the BRI critical edition of the Mahabharata today.
Right. And for anyone not familiar, what exactly is that?
So the BRI project was this monumental, decades-long scholarly effort in Pune, India. Scholars basically cross-referenced hundreds of regional manuscripts of the epic.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. The goal was to strip away all the regional folklore, the later interpolations, and those theatrical exaggerations to find the core unadorned text. And when you read that version, Bhishma isn't just this, two-dimensional grandfatherly warrior with a white beard. He's a profoundly tragic statesman. He's a man caught in this agonizing vice grip between his own rigid moral duty and an inescapable cosmic fate. His entire life cycle serves as really the ultimate stress test for the very concept of dharma, the cosmic law of righteousness and duty.
Okay, so to understand the sheer weight of that stress test, we can't even start with his birth on Earth.
Yeah,
Right?
so you could go back further.
Yeah, we have to look at the celestial realm. Because the man who would become Bhishma was actually born out of a cosmic crime.
Right.
Long before he was the patriarch of the Kuru dynasty, he was this divine being, one of the 8 Vasus, named Du, or Prabhasa in some texts. And the texts describe this moment when the 8 Vasus and their wives are visiting the earthly hermitage of the great sage Vashishta.
And Vashishta is not someone you want to mess with.
No, absolutely not. But Duyu's wife becomes entirely captivated by the sage's cow, Nandini. And Nandini isn't just, a regular cow. She's the daughter of Surabhi. She's a divine, wish-fulfilling cow.
Which is basically the source of a sage's entire aesthetic wealth.
Exactly. So Duyu's wife demands her. And Du, trying to be the good husband, I guess, he actually leads his brothers in stealing this divine creature from the sage.
Yeah, and stealing from an ascetic sage in Vedic literature is, it's essentially inviting universal catastrophe.
Yeah.
Vashishta is this being of immense spiritual power. He's accumulated it through unimaginable austerities.
Right.
So when he discovers the theft, he doesn't just, demand the cow back.
Yeah.
He issues a devastating curse. He condemns all 8 celestial vases to be born as mortals on Earth.
Oh, man.
To suffer the indignities, the pain, the physical limitations of human existence. And the other 7 vases, they immediately realize the horror of this sentence. They fall at the sage's feet, begging for mercy.
Like, we're sorry it was his idea.
Exactly. And Vashishta softens their punishment. He says they will be born on Earth, but they'll be liberated from their mortal bodies almost instantly. But Du, the ringleader, for him the sage dictates a very different fate. He must endure a long, full, grueling, mortal life.
Wow, so you have this immortal soul condemned to a mortal prison. But the real tragedy here is the vessel he is poured into. Because he's born into the Kuru kingdom, part of the lunar dynasty, to a family that is just entirely paralyzed by its own earthly desires.
Yeah.
His earthly father is King Shantanu, who is out hunting one day and sees this breathtakingly beautiful woman by the river. He's captivated. He immediately proposes marriage. She agrees, but her condition is absolute. She says King Shantanu must never question her actions, no matter what she does. The moment he questions her, she leaves him forever.
And this raises an important question, right? Because the woman, of course, is the river goddess, Ganga, in human form.
Right.
Shantanu is so blinded by desire, he just agrees to this completely impossible term. They marry, and soon after, they have their first child. And this is where the cosmic and the mortal realms just collide violently.
Yeah, this part is dark.
It is. Immediately upon the child's birth, Ganga takes the newborn to the river and drowns him.
I mean, can you imagine?
Shantanu is horrified. He's standing there as a father watching his child be murdered, but he's bound by his promise, so he says nothing. And Ganga repeats this unfathomable act 7 times. 7 infants drowned in the river.
It's just horrific.
The psychological toll on Shantanu is unbearable. So finally, when she walks toward the river with their 8th child, the human limit is reached. Shantanu shatters his vow. He physically stops her, demanding to know what kind of monster could drown her own children.
Right, because any normal person would break at that point.
Right.
But by questioning her, he breaks the foundational condition of their marriage. So Ganga stops. She reveals her true celestial identity and explains the mechanics of what he just witnessed. She explains that the first 7 infants were the 7 Vasas. So by drowning them, she was actually acting as the instrument of their liberation, freeing them from Vashishta's curse, exactly as the sage promised. But this 8th child, she reveals, is due. He's the ringleader. He's the one who has to live out his long mortal sentence. So Ganga leaves Shantanu, taking the infant boy with her to the celestial realms to be raised, promising to return him to Hastinapura only when he is fully prepared to be the heir to the throne.
And the preparation she provides for this boy, whom she names Devavrata, is it's unmatched in mythological history. He isn't just taught, he's engineered.
Yeah.
Brihaspati, the preceptor of the gods, and Shukracharya, the guru of the Asuras, they teach him the highest echelons of political science and statecraft. Sages Vashishta and Jivana instruct him in the Vedas. Sanat Kumara mentors him in spiritual sciences. Markandeya teaches him the rigorous duties of the ascetics.
Wow.
And on top of this intellectual foundation, he is forged into a supreme weapon. Parashurama, the martial avatar of Vishnu, trains him in warfare. He receives celestial weapons directly from Indra, the king of the gods.
It's basically like a cosmic witness protection program crossed with the most intense magical boarding school ever.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
But looking at that curriculum, I have to push back a bit, or at least wonder about the psychological architecture of a man taught by both brutal warriors and detached ascetics. And more importantly, considering he is a cursed celestial being condemned to live this specific difficult life, is his entire earthly existence just a pre-written divine prison sentence? Like if the gods engineered his birth and his education, is his free will just an illusion?
That's the core philosophical debate here. The epic does not view fate as a puppeteer pulling strings on a passive victim. The curse of Vashishta absolutely set the stage, right? It guaranteed Du would live a long, arduous human life. But a long life does not dictate a specific life. The chessboard was provided by the divine, but the moves Devavrata makes upon it are entirely his own. The vows he takes, the people he alienates, the structural violence he inadvertently causes, those are born from his own human agency. The tension between the destiny he was handed and the choices he makes is what elevates this from a simple myth into a profound philosophical tragedy.
Yeah, and his most defining choice happens shortly after he returns to Earth. Because Ganga brings a fully grown, spectacularly trained Devavrata back to King Shantanu. The kingdom is ecstatic. They have this overqualified, brilliant heir apparent. But then the entire trajectory of the Kuru dynasty shatters, because Shantanu, once again, is conquered by his own earthly desire.
Right, history repeats itself.
Completely. Walking by the river Yamuna, the aging king falls deeply in love with a fisherwoman named Satyavati. He approaches her father to ask for her hand in marriage. But the fisherman is a ruthlessly pragmatic negotiator. He agrees to the marriage, but he demands that the son born to Satyavati must be the one to inherit the throne of Hastinapura.
Which is a political impossibility for Shantanu. He's already instated Devrata as the crown prince. To disinherit a perfectly capable, divinely endorsed son simply to satisfy his own lust would be an egregious violation of royal dharma. So, Shantanu refuses the fisherman's demand, but he returns to the palace a broken man. He falls into a severe silent depression.
Yeah.
He begins to waste away. Devavrata, ever the dutiful son, notices his father's rapid decline. He conducts his own investigation, tracks down the fisherman, and learns of this impossible demand holding his father's happiness hostage.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because what Devavrata does next is the fulcrum upon which the entire epic pivots. He stands before the fisherman and voluntarily renounces his claim to the throne. He completely cedes his birthright so his father can marry this woman. But the fisherman is playing a multi-generational game of chess.
He really is.
He looks at Devavrata and counters, arguing that even if Devavrata steps aside, what is to stop Devavrata's future children from waging a civil war to reclaim the throne from Satyavati's children?
Hmm.
To completely neutralize that hypothetical threat, Devrata takes this incomprehensible vow. He vows lifelong brahmacharya, absolute celibacy. He will never marry. He will never father children. He is intentionally severing his own bloodline.
And the magnitude of this vow in ancient Vedic society cannot be overstated. A king's primary sacred duty was the continuation of his lineage to ensure the stability of the realm. By taking this vow, Devrata is annihilating his own political and biological future. The texts say the heavens themselves tremble at the sheer force of this renunciation. The gods rain flowers from the sky and give him a new name, Bhishma, which translates to the one who undertakes a severe or terrible vow.
And King Shantanu is so overwhelmed by the sheer scale of his son's sacrifice that he grants Bhishma that unique divine boon we mentioned, Ichenmritu, the absolute power to choose the exact time of his own death. Death cannot touch him until he explicitly permits it. But looking at this critically, the tragic irony is just deafening here. Bhishma makes this terrifying sacrifice to secure the kingdom's stability and his father's happiness. But in doing so, doesn't he completely sabotage the realm? By removing himself, the only truly qualified leader, from the gene pool, he creates a massive power vacuum. Doesn't he guarantee the catastrophic succession crisis that eventually drowns the entire continent in blood during the war?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are identifying the central paradox of Bhishma's existence. In modern organizational theory, we often discuss the concept of servant leadership, the idea of prioritizing institutional values and the welfare of others over personal gain.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, and on paper, Bhishma is the ultimate servant leader. His personal integrity is unquestionable, but his sacrifice is dangerously short-sighted. By stepping out of the line of succession to solve a temporary emotional crisis for his father, he inflicts severe generational trauma upon the kingdom. He leaves the throne vulnerable to lesser men, chaining himself to the role of a guardian who must constantly fix the broken machinery of a state he was meant to rule.
Yeah, so you have a man who has intentionally sterilized his own political future, yet possesses the martial and intellectual power to rule the world. So what does he actually do? He becomes the ultimate power behind the throne. King Shantanu and Satyavati have two sons, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. Shantanu passes away, and shortly after, the arrogant Chitrangada is killed in a skirmish. This leaves Bhishma to place a young, physically weak, and completely unprepared Vichitravirya on the throne, acting as regent to keep the wolves at bay.
And it's in this role as regent that Bhishma's absolute power begins to manifest as structural violence. Vichitravirya comes of age and requires a wife to continue the dynasty. Bhishma learns that the neighboring kingdom of Kashi is holding a Swayamvara, a royal assembly, where three princesses, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika, will choose their husbands from invited suitors.
And Hastinapura was deliberately not invited.
Exactly. And viewing this as an insult to his dynasty, Bhishma invades the ceremony. He single-handedly defeats the assembled kings, including the formidable King Shalva, and forcibly abducts all three princesses to marry them off to his frail half-brother.
The martial superiority he displays is terrifying, but the fallout is infinitely worse. When they arrive back in Hastinapura, the eldest princess, Amba, steps forward. She reveals that she and King Shalva were deeply in love and had secretly planned to choose each other at the ceremony. Hearing this, Bhishma's rigid sense of honor kicks in. He realizes taking an unwilling bride is against Dharma, so he grants Amba her freedom and sends her back to Shalva, but Shalva rejects her.
Right, because his fragile male ego cannot handle the fact that Bhishma defeated him in combat.
Exactly. He tells Amba he will not accept another man's prize.
And Amba is utterly devastated. She's been rejected by the man she loved, discarded by the man who violently abducted her, and humiliated in a way that prevents her from returning to her father's kingdom. She returns to Hastinapura and demands that Bhishma, as the man who ruined her life, must marry her. But Bhishma is shackled by his terrible vow of celibacy. He refuses.
Yeah.
So Amba, now a woman with nothing left to lose, swears a vow of total vengeance. She travels into the forests and seeks out Parashurama Bhishma's own martial guru and begs him to force his student to rectify this monstrous injustice.
Which sets up one of the craziest fights in the epic. Parashurama, furious at his student's arrogance, marches to Kurukshetra and orders Bhishma to marry Amba. Bhishma refuses. This sparks a cataclysmic 23-day duel between the invincible student and the immortal master. The texts describe this combat in apocalyptic terms. They are unleashing celestial weapons that level mountains and boil rivers. The psychological weight of Bhishma fighting the very man who taught him how to hold a bow is immense. But Bhishma holds his ground. They fight to an absolute standstill until the celestial gods physically manifest on the battlefield and force them to stop, warning that their escalating warfare will unspool the fabric of the universe.
The stalemate proves Bhishma's martial supremacy, for sure, but it leaves Amba's trauma entirely unresolved. Realizing that no man on earth can defeat Bhishma, Amba immerses herself in brutal ascetic penances, eventually immolating herself in a fire, swearing she will be reincarnated solely to become the instrument of Bhishma's death. Meanwhile, back in Hastinapura, Bhishma's rigid adherence to his principles is about to be tested again. The weak king, Vichitravirya, dies of illness without producing an heir. The Kuru dynasty is literally hours away from total extinction.
And Satyavati, the woman whose ambition caused Bhishma's vow in the first place, is frantic. She begs Bhishma to break his vow of celibacy just this once. She pleads with him to either take the crown or father children with the widows to save the kingdom. There is a fascinating moment in the sources where the royal ministers suggest he use a little pragmatic deceit. They tell him the kingdom needs a strong king, and no one will judge him for breaking a vow to save millions of people from anarchy.
Right.
But Bhishma's response is blistering. He declares his absolute commitment to Yukti Haran, the abandonment of deceit. He states that a kingdom built on compromised integrity might stand for a day, but it will never stand as a dynasty.
Instead of bending his rules, Bhishma suggests the ancient practice of niyoga, where a designated sage, in this case, Satyavati's own ascetic son, Vyasa impregnates the widows to ensure the continuation of the lineage. This convoluted solution results in the birth of Dhritarashtra, who is born blind, and Pandu, who is born pale and fragile. Once again, Bhishma is trapped. He must raise these boys, protect them, and continue managing the vast empire while maintaining his vow of never taking the throne himself.
The analogy that constantly comes to mind reading through your notes is that Bhishma is like a massively overqualified chief operating officer who wrote a legal contract permanently barring himself from ever becoming CEO. He is desperately trying to keep a failing, corrupt family business afloat, even if it means destroying innocent bystanders like Amba. Doesn't his inflexible pride start becoming actively destructive here? He's trapping people in misery, letting the kingdom teeter on the edge of collapse, all to maintain the purity of his own personal word.
What's fascinating here is that the Mahabharata itself heavily critiques Bhishma on this exact point. His supreme virtue mutates into his fatal flaw. His absolute commitment to the abstract institution of the Hastinapura throne blinds him to the very real moral decay festering upon it. He prioritizes the structural integrity of the state over the ethical soul of the state. And this sets the stage for the core philosophical dilemma of the epic. As the next generation, the 100 Kara brothers, led by the malicious Duryodhana and the 5 righteous Pandava brothers, come of age and push the kingdom towards civil war.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Bhishma is widely acknowledged as the wisest, most righteous man in the kingdom. He knows unequivocally that Duryodhana is corrupt, vicious, and unfit to rule. He knows the Pandavas are the rightful ethical heirs. Yet, when the great Kurukshetra war finally erupts, Bhishma doesn't just fight for the evil Kauravas, he leads their army as the supreme commander. Why? Because decades prior, he swore an oath to protect whoever sat on the throne of Hastinapura. He never factored in the possibility that a tyrant would inherit that seat.
The philosophical term for this trap is niyama. It translates roughly to an obsessive adherence to the letter of the law while completely abandoning the spirit of the law. Bhishma allows his oath to become a moral cage. The most harrowing manifestation of this is the infamous dice game.
Oh, this is the worst part.
It really is. Duryodhana orchestrates a rigged game of dice, stripping the Pandavas of their kingdom, their wealth, and their freedom. In a staggering display of cruelty, Duryodhana has the Pandava's wife, Draupadi, dragged by her hair into the royal assembly to be publicly stripped of her garments. Draupadi, weeping and terrified, looks directly at Bhishma, the patriarch, the lawmaker, the invincible protector, and begs him to intervene.
And Bhishma lowers his head in silence. The man who willingly went to war against the gods and fought his own master to a standstill to protect his honor sits quietly while a woman is tortured in his own court. He mutters that the nature of dharma is subtle, and because the reigning king Dhritarashtra is permitting the abuse, Bhishma claims he has no authority to stop it. It is a catastrophic moral failure.
It is the moment his legacy fractures permanently. His niyama collapses into profound complicity. By refusing to speak out against the legal authority of the king, he becomes an enabler of horrific violence. He saves the bureaucratic structure of the kingdom, but he utterly sacrifices its moral justification to exist. The trauma of that silence haunts him all the way to the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
When the war begins, Bhishma serves as the supreme commander of the Kaurava forces for the first 10 days. And despite his internal conflict, he's a terrifying force of nature. The military casualty reports in the text are staggering. He's said to annihilate 10,000 soldiers and 1,000 chariots every single day. The Pandava army is being systematically dismantled by this one man.
His tactical genius is just as formidable as his physical strength. On one of the early days of the war, the Pandava forces launch a ferocious, seemingly unstoppable charge that causes Duryodhana to panic. Bhishma does not flinch. He executes a brilliant military maneuver, organizing his troops into the Ardha Chandravyu, the crescent formation. Tactically, this works like a massive funnel. By pulling his center back, he invites the aggressive Pandava charge deep into a pocket. Once they overextend into the cup of the crescent, Bhishma's archers on the advancing horns of the formation close in, exposing the Pandavas to devastating crossfire from three sides. It is a masterclass in emotional restraint and strategic brilliance under fire.
But inside that brilliance is a glaring, agonizing paradox. Bhishma is butchering the Pandava infantry, but he absolutely refuses to kill the 5 Pandava brothers themselves. He loves them. And it gets even more surreal. Every single night when the fighting pauses, the Pandavas sneak into Bhishma's tent. He greets them with affection, and they literally ask him for strategic advice. He's commanding the Kaurava army by day and acting as a tactical consultant for the enemy by night.
It highlights the agonizing split in his consciousness. His physical body is executing his sworn duty to the throne of Hastinapura, but his soul is desperately trying to ensure the righteous side survives. He is orchestrating a war where he is actively hoping for his own side to lose.
This internal contradiction infuriates Krishna, who is driving Arjuna's chariot for the Pandavas. Krishna had taken a strict vow not to pick up a single weapon during this war, but by the 9th day, Bhishma's archery is so overwhelming, and Arjuna is hesitating so badly because he cannot bring himself to murder his beloved grandfather. Krishna realizes the Pandavas are going to lose if this continues. In a surge of divine fury at Arjuna's hesitation, Krishna physically leaps out of the chariot, grabs a massive, shattered chariot wheel, hoists it over his head like a weapon, and charges directly at Bhishma.
And Bhishma's reaction is extraordinary. He doesn't draw an arrow. He doesn't brace for impact. He drops his bow and stands with his arms open. He tells Krishna that being struck down by the divine is the greatest liberation he could possibly achieve. He welcomes death.
He practically manipulates the incarnation of a god into breaking his own vow.
Precisely. And in doing so, Bhishma proves a fundamental point that he himself failed to grasp. Even the divine will shatter a rigid rule if breaking it serves a higher moral necessity. Krishna was willing to break his vow of non-combat to protect righteousness. Bhishma, conversely, allowed Draupadi to be abused to protect a vow.
Right. Arjuna snaps out of his hesitation, runs after Krishna, and begs him to drop the wheel, promising to fight with full lethal intent. But the reality is clear. Bhishma is an insurmountable obstacle. He has to be eliminated. So on the night of the 9th day, the Pandavas visit Bhishma's tent and ask him directly how they can kill him.
Yeah, imagine that conversation.
It's wild. And Bhishma tells them his one unbreakable martial rule. He will never raise a weapon against someone who was born a woman. Armed with this knowledge, on the 10th day, the Pandavas bring Shikhandi to the front lines.
Shikhandi is the reincarnation of Amba. She was reborn to King Drupada, raised as a male warrior, and specifically destined to orchestrate Bhishma's downfall. When Bhishma sees Shikhandi advancing on the battlefield, he recognizes the soul of the woman he wronged decades ago. Bound by his vow, Bhishma lowers his bow and refuses to fight.
Arjuna, utilizing a strategy that walks a very thin line of martial honor, positions his chariot directly behind Shikhandi. Using Shikhandi as a human shield to prevent Bhishma from retaliating, Arjuna unleashes a relentless, devastating volley of arrows. The text described the arrows piercing every single inch of Bhishma's armor. There are so many shafts embedded in his flesh that when he finally topples from his chariot, his body doesn't even touch the blood-soaked earth. He is suspended mid-air, his weight resting entirely on the shafts of Arjuna's arrows.
The visual imagery of the Shurshai, the bed of arrows, is perhaps the most iconic and layered metaphor in all of Eastern literature. It is the physical manifestation of his entire existence. He is literally pinned down by the consequences of his own choices, suspended agonizingly between the mortal earth and the divine heaven, enduring unimaginable pain but refusing to yield to it.
Because, incredibly, he doesn't die. He utilizes that divine boon from his father, Ikamrityu. He retains the absolute right to choose his moment of death. And despite his body being a pincushion of jagged wood and iron, he decides he will not die yet. He turns this gruesome instrument of torture into his final throne of wisdom.
He calculates that the current astrological alignment is inauspicious. He chooses to wait 58 days for Uttarayana, the winter solstice, when the sun begins its northern journey. In Vedic cosmology, passing away during this specific solar phase grants a soul moksha, the ultimate liberation from the endless cycle of death and rebirth. He intends to wait out the war, in agony, to ensure his final exit is spiritually perfect.
The moments immediately following his fall are incredibly poignant. As he lies suspended on the arrows, his head drops back, unsupported. He asks the gathered warriors for a pillow. The kings frantically rush to their tents to bring him cushions made of fine silk and velvet. Bhishma smiles and rejects them, stating they are unfit for a warrior's bed. He looks at Arjuna. Arjuna understands immediately. He draws his bow and shoots 3 arrows directly into the earth beneath Bhishma's head, providing a jagged iron rest that aligns perfectly with his ruined body.
It demonstrates the profound, unspoken understanding between the grandfather and the grandson. But the physical reality of those 58 days is staggering. He's bleeding, exposed to the elements, and bearing the full gravitational weight of his body on arrow shafts. Yet he masters his biology. This prolonged wait is his final penance. It represents the painful karmic fruit of his silence during Draupadi's disrobing, but his ability to withstand it through sheer meditation demonstrates the absolute triumph of his spiritual willpower over his physical form.
So what does this all mean for the aftermath of the epic? The Kurukshetra war grinds on for 8 more days. It ends in a total apocalyptic victory for the Pandavas. Millions of soldiers are dead. The Kaurava lineage is wiped out. Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, is finally crowned king of Hastinapura. But the victory is entirely Pyrrhic. Yudhishthira is mentally shattered, consumed by guilt and the overwhelming trauma of the carnage. Krishna realizes the new king is psychologically incapable of ruling. He tells Yudhishthira there is only one mind left on earth, capable of teaching him how to govern a broken world. So they journey out to the battlefield, where Bhishma is still actively lying on the bed of arrows.
What follows are the Shanti Parva and the Anushasana Parva, which together constitute massive, sprawling volumes of the Mahabharata. Bhishma, using his final breaths, bleeding from hundreds of wounds, delivers one of the most comprehensive and nuanced discourses on statecraft, ethics, and philosophy ever recorded.
It is genuinely staggering to read. He's actively dying of massive trauma, yet he delivers a masterclass. He expounds on Rajadharma, the intricate duties of a sovereign, balancing compassion with the necessary force required to maintain order. He details Abhidharma, the flexible ethics of statecraft during times of extreme crisis and distress. He imparts the Vishnu Sahasranama, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, a profound spiritual chant.
He strips away all the institutional illusions he previously defended. He instructs Yudhishthira that justice must be completely blind to personal bias, that a king is merely a servant to the welfare of the citizens, and that a ruler's ego must be entirely eradicated. He outlines a philosophy of governance that is adaptable, deeply moral, and remarkably modern.
But reading these chapters, I find it impossible not to push back. If Bhishma possessed this incredibly lucid, brilliantly nuanced understanding of ethics and governance, why didn't he apply a single shred of this wisdom to stop the war than 10 years earlier? Why didn't he use this profound knowledge of Abhidharma ethics in a crisis to break his own destructive vow when Draupadi was being assaulted?
This raises an important question, and it highlights why the bed of arrows is the crucial, necessary crucible for his redemption. When Bhishma stood in the royal court, he was clothed in titles: regent, commander, patriarch. He was insulated by his vows and his institutional power. That power bred Niyamarga, his destructive rigidness. But on the bed of arrows, he's stripped of everything. His political power is gone. His earthly titles mean nothing. His body is immobilized. The arrows physically bleed the institutional rigidness out of him. What is left on that bed is pure, unadulterated dharma. He could not act on this wisdom when he was bound by the intoxicating pride of his own vows, but in his agonizingly slow death, he finally sheds his ego. He can speak the truth clearly, leaving it as a manual for the generation that survived his mistakes.
It is an incredibly heavy legacy. When the 58 days finally conclude and the sun begins its northern transit, Bhishma calls his family close. He says his final goodbyes, focuses his immense life force, and willfully leaves his shattered body, attaining the liberation of moksha. Recapping this timeline as a wild intellectual journey, we started with a celestial being who stole a cow and was cursed to a mortal prison. He evolved into a fiercely devoted son who intentionally destroyed his own future to appease his father's lust. He became an invincible warrior who terrified the gods, a severely flawed guardian whose silence enabled catastrophic abuse, and ultimately the supreme dying sage of the epic.
His life cycle forces us to grapple with the terrifying complexities of duty. He is revered as the ultimate symbol of sacrifice and personal integrity, yet, as we have thoroughly explored, his inflexible adherence to his own personal promises directly enabled the rise of catastrophic evil.
Which proves why applying a binary black-and-white moral judgment to Bhishma is impossible. You can't just categorize him neatly as righteous or unrighteous. The diagnosis is murky because the application of human loyalty is inherently murky.
But as we close this deep dive, there is one final, entirely different perspective we should consider, a cosmic perspective. We have spent this entire time analyzing Bhishma's impact on human history, politics, and the morality of his vows. But let's rewind to the very beginning. Dew, the celestial Vasu, was cursed to endure this lifetime of immense suffering simply because his wife wanted a sage's cow.
Right, a cow. A magical cow, but still.
Think about the staggering disproportion of that causality. Because of a stolen cow in a celestial forest, a man endures 80 years of emotional torture. A royal bloodline is mutated. Generations are traumatized. A woman immolates herself in vengeance, and millions of soldiers are slaughtered on the fields of Kurukshetra. Did Dew's lifetime of suffering and the collateral damage of millions of lives actually fit the crime of petty theft? Or, in the grand, terrifying scheme of cosmic justice, is the real tragedy that the gods use immense human suffering simply to balance their own celestial spreadsheets?
A heavy, unsettling thought to leave you with, and something to ponder the next time you find yourself entirely certain about the mechanics of justice. But that is exactly why we wade into the murky waters here on the Deep Dive. Thank you for sending in your notes, and until next time, keep questioning the narrative.